darkness, a fleeting glimpse. Centuries of turmoil, rotting in the night. We were warned, we were told. And now, the collapse is here. We tried to warn you, we tried to fight. And now we have no choice but to run. Welcome to the jungle apocalypse.
Hey folks, Rob here from the Jungle Apocalypse podcast, back for episode number 2 of the show, of our great return. And as always with me is Mike.
Hey everyone.
And we got some cool stories to talk about this week. Seems like the world's blowing up and we're all caught in the middle of it, being, especially where we're Canadian. That's the one that gets us.
Yeah. It's been an interesting year, to say the least. The last year here being Canadian, it's been interesting.
Yeah, I find it a lot online too, is you get these comments and they're like, yeah, well, we should annex Canada. We should take it over. We should do this. You know, like you can't exist without us. And I'm like, man, you guys really don't read history books, do you? Like this is the thing with it. Like, okay, so for people that might not know, back in, what was it, the 1960s, we developed a plane that would outperform even as close as possible to the current F-22 Raptor, called the Avro. Thing was amazing. Yep. Who stepped in and made us get rid of it and threatened us with a bunch of sanctions? So we dumped it in Lake Ontario, the United States. You know, like the reason Canada doesn't have what Trump wants us to have all comes down to the fact that the United States has stepped in multiple times and basically said, like, hey, do this, do that, you know, like it's absolutely ridiculous. And now we have, you know, the great orange testicle fucking telling us that he's going to come across the border and annex us.
Yeah. And then his stunt last weekend there with the North American continent being draped in an American flag kind of, I think, upset of quite a few people. Not just here in Canada, but in Greenland and several places in Europe as well.
Yeah, well, this is the thing that gets me about it is like the people that are for them coming across the border and doing these things are generally not the most intelligent people.
No.
I saw a great TikTok yesterday where it was like, it was a MAGA supporter and they were talking about Venezuela and they're like, hey, we caught us a Venezuela. It was hilarious. I wish I had saved it because I would have played it. But anyway, needless to say, I think a lot of this is just ignorance on the actual facts of what's going on. Like, does Canada have problems? Yes, 100%. I'm not very impressed with our leadership. I think,
me either.
You know, Mark Carney is just a Trudeau 2.0.
And a little bit worse than Trudeau 2.0. He's Trudeau 2.0 with major backing from World Bank. So he's like WEF on steroids.
Well, he's definitely more well-spoken than Trudeau. So I'll give him that. You know, he doesn't say and every time he's talking. However, I mean, at the end of the day, I still think, and this is my speculation on it right now, is that it's almost like they're working together, Trump and Carney, to bring down the country and put us in a position where we would need to be annexed because we can no longer survive.
Well, it almost seems that way, especially as like his first official act before he became prime minister, when he was officially announced his campaign for the leadership of the Liberal Party here in Canada, was moved all of his assets, including his big multinational conglomerate that he owns and controls, into the United States, put a whole bunch of taxes on companies such as that once he did become prime minister, and basically buried all of his assets in the US there. So like he's saying he's working for our interests, but everything that he's personally done for himself is pointing in the opposite direction.
Well, it's like this annexation talk is coming just as we're having massive drills over BC, the Yukon, and Alaska, where the U.S. and Canadian military are working together. So that's why I think a lot of it's smoke and mirrors to kind of just play us into that corner. I don't think there is any real separation.
Well, then it was announced just at the end of last month there too that the Department of Homeland Security in the U.S. just purchased another 22 Canadian-made armored personnel vehicles for like diplomats and stuff.
Yeah, see, there you go. There is no real separation. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's a way to distract people from the fact that the Western economies are crashing at a significant rate. We're seeing China really come ahead in this scenario, and it's almost like, you know, they're like, oh well, China's going to take over us. They're gonna exceed us. I think they already are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like we're seeing them. They're funneling money everywhere. They seem to have all this extra influence that they haven't had years previous.
Well, India had the chance to join us in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, but instead, at the time of the negotiations were going on, they chose to side with BRICS. So that's 1 billion people teaming up with another country of 1 billion people. Like, yeah, something's going to be changing there with the way the economics of the world work. Like people don't realize how populous Asia actually is, and it's going to be a controlling factor come in the next century here. Like this millennia is going to belong to or not this millennia, but this century is definitely going to belong to the Asians.
Well, yeah, they've already kind of gone ahead of everybody else. When I talk to people that have been to China, that are going over there and doing business, the things they're coming back and telling me is unreal. It's basically what the New World Order is supposed to be, where everybody's got an ID card, a digital ID. There is no cash used. Everything's paid for with your face and your biometrics. And the technology in some of these major cities in China is just on a next level that we're not seeing at all in the Western countries. I mean, even look at Dubai and what's going on there as far as like technology and their advancements. We're so far behind.
And Dubai was a major investor in the Silk Road 2.0 initiative, the Belt and Road campaign that China was doing. So, like, come on, when one of the largest oil or OPEC nations is backing BRICS, it's clear sign that we are shifting to the New World Economic Forum or New World Economic Powers, which is going to be the Eastern powers. Like, I hate to say it, but yeah, the West has reached its peak.
Well, and this is it, you know, this is the thing that gets me about what goes on online is this was all told years ago. Back in the 90s, we knew this was coming.
Well, if anybody who played any kind of cyberpunk role-playing game as a kid or like growing up or whatever, you seen how a lot of those games were set up. It was basically set in the time that we're living right now, like 2020, Cyberpunk 2020 is a prime example. The decade we're in right now. Basically, it was Russia and China and the European Union that were running the show. The U.S. had basically completely collapsed as an economy and a state, fractured into separate entities. Like you had like Night City being one city-state on the East Coast, basically representing what used to be California. And then Texas was its own independent nation. You had a small group of the similar to the 13 colonies at the beginning of the United States there as like the new USA Republic. And then pretty much everything in between the West Coast and the East Coast were fractured states.
Well, it kind of, have you been watching Fallout?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you notice in this season, they're talking about the the United States annexed territory of Canada?
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's a huge part of Fallout's lore there is just before the big Sino-American War, the U.S. needed to get a bunch of resources because they basically tapped all their resources out in the United States. Like they had no water left, basically, no uranium, nothing left. So they annexed Canada to take it over because the Chinese were coming over the the Bering Strait, and the first place they landed in was Alaska to take over the U.S. And like the biggest part of the war and what caused the U.S. to push into China was the Alaska campaign. They barely beat the Chinese out and into the Chinese mainland, and that's basically on 2077 they had the nuclear exchange. And now, according to the lore of the Fallout TV show, it was the major corporations that triggered that war so that they could take over at the beginning.
And yeah, wasn't it like 25 years of the great resource war that they fought? And then that's when the nukes finally flew, was 25 years after that started. And you kind of line that stuff up. And I mean, I don't know, like maybe that's the route we're going down. It always seems kind of hard to, make a clear judgment on what is actually happening versus what they, kind of put out there into the consciousness. So,
well, no, that's the thing. That's one thing I've noticed. It's been popping up a lot in like my social media feeds and everything. Is the revelation of the method has been a really popular topic amongst like the esoteric crowd, the conspiracy crowd, and the people who cover weird topics.
mm-hmm.
And the revelation of the method has been a big one that's been making its rounds again.
Yeah, I think people. I guess what I'm trying to say is that and this is something I've thought a lot about this week, is how people like us that have been around, in these circles since the 90s remember things like the revelation of the method, where they have to reveal these things to you. And I was thinking the other day of like, can you imagine what Bill Cooper would be saying right now? Like compared to what is actually being broadcast with Alex Jones or some of the other big commenters online.
Well, if he hadn't have been like, if he wouldn't have gotten canceled, like say like he actually survived up to now and hadn't got canceled during the great social media purge of 2016 to 2020, and he survived that, I bet you he would be gloating quite a bit, going, see, I told you guys this was happening. You didn't believe me 30 years ago. Look, here's the receipts. It's actually happening. Because I noticed that started happening around 2021 with certain right-wing talking head people. All of a sudden, all the conspiracy theories that they were involved in started coming to fruition. Guys like We Are Change or Luke Radowski, who started out, he was 11 years old when he started out in the conspiracy theory realm. Had his first show on YouTube at 11, and he's been talking about that stuff for a long time, almost as long as we have. And yeah, he started in like 2021, 2022 going, yeah, I was right. Look at all the stuff. It's all been right. So I think Bill Cooper would have probably gone along the same route as that. He would have been maybe not bragging, but seeing like, hey, this is what happens when people don't listen to warnings.
Well, exactly. And I mean, if you couldn't see the writing on the wall all those years ago of what route it was going, it was like back, you remember in the late 90s, there was the whole thing where they were going around and putting stickers on mailboxes, one blue, one red. And if you were I can't remember, if you were on the blue list, you were going to an internment camp. And then if you're on the red list, you're going to be, one of the chosen or something along those lines.
When it was just actually about alternating mail delivery days.
Exactly. And then there was the whole thing where they're putting cameras and microphones in your cable boxes to listen to you. And then guys would go out and tear a cable box apart and show that there was no cameras, there was no listening devices in any of them. Not to mention the technology at the time wasn't bi-directional, so there was no way for them to send that information back to the cable plant. However, nowadays, we walk around with a little recording device in our pocket that records everything we're listening to, takes notes on all the websites we visit, and people have they're not upset about it. They're more than happy to go buy the new iPhone.
Yeah, and I don't know how true the story is, but it also reminds me of a story that dropped on Reddit in 2014, I believe, where a person had bought like a cheap power brick or like power bar, like surge protector.
Mm-hmm.
They plugged it in, and then they had a friend come over who just got like one of those like bug sweepers, and like they were just playing around with it in his house, and sure enough it went across the power or surge protector, and the thing signaled that there was something inside. So they took it apart and they found a little phone card, like a SIM card for a phone, like a little microphone attached to the SIM card, and it was all wired into the power supply of the surge protector.
Yeah, see, like if you don't think you're being spied on now, you're crazy. It's clear as day that like everything we do is monitored. We already live in the new world order. It's not that Carney or any of these other globalists are going to bring about a new world order. We already live in it. It just most people haven't realized it yet.
Well, I was just joking with my friend yesterday. He was like saying like how if he was in charge, he would change up how policing and doctors and nurses and stuff get paid. That he would pay them based on like an hourly rate, like a minimum wage, and then on the severity of the call that they had to attend to. So like say you have to attend a murder, you get a bonus.
Okay. That's different way of looking at it, I guess. But
and I just looked at him and go, well, they tried doing that before in like the 1800s there. Like they had fire departments and police services in both New York and Toronto, two of the largest cities at the time in North America, where it was basically outsourced police work and fire department work. And what ended up happening was criminals were getting away and buildings were burning down because opposing gangs of police and fire departments were fighting each other to take care of the crime.
Isn't that always the way, though? You give people the ability to make a little extra money and they'll abuse the system.
Well, hey, you can't get rid of the corruption.
No, and I think that's an important point, too, is like we're just as... You see them talking about like, oh, how corrupt China is. China is so corrupt. Yeah, but so are we. All governments are. That's the whole point of it. I think the advantage we had growing up was that our grandparents went through World War II and their parents went through World War I, and they had a concept of how dangerous governments with unfettered power could be. And that's why, the United States was set up the way it was, and why Canada, at the time anyway, we had some really clear ways of dealing with things to make sure that those powers were kept in check. And since the late 90s, we've eliminated all of that, especially after 9/11.
Yeah, we got rid of a bunch of those checks and balances that did give the common folk like ourselves a bit of a say. Now it seems like it's gone back to like voting doesn't really matter. It's almost like we're voting in a communist state where we submit our vote, but the vote doesn't really matter because the people who actually decide who's going to be running the show have already decided who's going to be running the show. The rest is just theater.
Well, I think that's what we're seeing with Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney is that the powers that be, the ones that sit above government, have decided that Poilievre wasn't going to play ball, or maybe he wouldn't be able to affect the social change that needed to be made. So instead, we had Carney come back from England and start running the country, right? So I don't see any of this ending well. I mean, I think we're, like we said last week, we're set up for another world war, and we're just seeing the players, excuse me, be implemented into the order.
Yeah, it's looking at what's going on right now as a parallel to history, it reminds me a lot of what I seen happening leading up to the like Nazi takeover of Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of parallels as to what's going on. Like there is a lot of the same rhetoric coming from Germany that's coming out of the United States right now. While Poland should be our property, Poland has always been our property. We need to take Poland back. And that's basically the same as the Manifest Destiny. The reason why the states dropped the whole Manifest Destiny thing in the 50s and 60s is because it was starting to be pointed at as a very national socialist idea, so a Nazi idea. So they kind of pushed it down and hid it, but they still had that little bit of the Manifest Destiny thing in their ideology. because that's just how the states have always been ever since the Revolutionary War. There, they've had that manifest destiny mindset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then I don't know the way the world's going. It's kind of confusing, and I think a lot of people have gotten lazy as far as learning about what the actual history was, not just taking an influencer's point of view and instead of like I see people on TikTok that will watch historians and they'll just take their point of view as fact when they haven't, you got to go out and read the information. You have to learn the information. You can't just take anybody's word for fact. It's like us. Anybody that takes our word as fact is not somebody that, I really respect, because I want to be questioned. I want to have people tell me their opinions. I want to learn about history.
Pushback. That's the way you learn. Like the only way you can break out of the ideologies that you're stuck into is to push against them. And that's how you grow as a person. Like you learn about yourself. Well, hey, you know what? I used to think this, but now I don't think that way anymore. And I've become more open-minded as to what I accept. It's funny how thinking that you're closing off your mind by not looking into things, but realistically, you're closing off your mind by following the narrative that you have set up in your own mind.
Exactly. It was something I saw another great TikTok video where a guy was talking about how we all want to believe that we're awake and aware, or I hate to use the term woke because that's been so tainted lately. But if you're acting emotionally to subjects, say what just happened in Minnesota, and not actually looking at the logistical facts of everything, then you are asleep. You are a sheep. You are paying attention, or you're not paying attention to what's really going on.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's some craziness, yes, going on in Minnesota. There's more than likely fraud going on there. There's a whole bunch of other issues. Like there's the whole immigration thing. And then like what's really happening? I'm not in Minnesota, so I can't really say what's actually going on there. I just know what I've seen in my news feeds. And I'm lucky enough I have both sides. I try to have both sides in my news feed. So I get kind of like the two sides of the talking heads on YouTube. And it's basically the same thing both sides are saying, just the opposing opinion of each other. It's both sides are basically pushing for this civil war. So it really makes me wonder, like, why are they pushing for this? Is there something that the people who write these narratives are aware of that we're not? Well, and that's why they're pushing this stuff?
I know. So I did a little experiment where I signed up for 2 TikTok accounts. And on one, I purposely liked any pro-Trump stuff. And on the other one, I purposely liked any anti-Trump stuff, just to see how the algorithm would react to these things. And now if I log into either account, it's like video after video after video. And I'm trying to think of the right words for it, but it constantly reaffirms what that viewpoint is. Like on the one that's anti-Trump, it's constant, like the guy in Minnesota, he grabbed his gun, he was firing off rounds, he did all this stuff. And then you go on the other one, and it's like, I've seen 6 different views of what happened. And you can clearly see that he wasn't grabbing for his gun, that the cops or the ICE officers just executed the guy. And I'm like, man, none of us were there. So yeah. How do you really know? And especially in the day and age of AI, an AI video, like what do you know is real anymore?
I was just going to say that, like we're in a very speculative age right now because of the way AI can make anything look realistic.
Well, the video stuff, like what we're doing just on unexplained, as far as, our short videos and stuff, we're using AI video quite heavily, not to manipulate people, but to use it as a quick way to make content. And it's starting to become indistinguishable from real life. Like if you spend the time to create say you wanted to fake something, I don't know, an alien abduction, and you spent, you know, a couple hours generating videos and trying things over and over again, sooner or later, you will come out with a video that looks very convincing that somebody was, you know, abducted by aliens.
Yeah, and it's only going to be a matter of time before we start seeing those.
Well, we're seeing them now. I'm pretty sure there's been more than one instance where the videos have been faked. Another TikToker, YouTuber that I follow, she does deep dives on this sort of thing, and she was talking about how after Maduro was captured in Venezuela, we saw a ton of fake AI videos of the apparent abduction of him. So we were being fed that stuff like bang, 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 and before the official stuff, the official videos came out, or the pictures of him doing the perp walk there with the headphones on and bag on his head and stuff. So by the time that came out, we had already had a tainted view of what actually happened. And we're starting to see it more and more and more. Now, you got to remember too that the videos or the tools we have access to are a fraction as powerful as what the back channels have access to. Like you can be sure that, well, Elon Musk said on X the other day that by the end of next year, you're going to be able to produce a 1-hour film for about $10,000 using AI. And
that's ridiculously cheap.
It's ridiculously cheap, and it's ridiculously powerful because you can tell it to do just about anything. Like the tools that are out there for the public consumption aren't there yet. That was another thing that he mentioned is that the cost of running these tools right now is so expensive, the general public can't have them. So if they can already, if he's saying stuff like that, then the chances are the tools that they have internally that they don't care, you know, if it costs, you know, $10,000 because it's in their own internal systems, they're able to do stuff that would be indistinguishable from real life.
And that explains why RAM is now impossible to get.
Yeah. Well, RAM prices have gone. Well, like I said, I looked for a 64 gig kit for my workstation, and it was going to be $1,000, I think, for 64 gigs, which was ridiculous because when I bought the workstation, it was only, I think I paid $300 or $400 for that same 64 gig kit.
I was just going to say they were about $300 in a year ago for the 64 gig kit. I should have picked one up at the time when I seen that, because yeah, I was going to do the same thing. That's one of the upgrades I figured I'd be able to do for my system that would be inexpensive. Not anymore.
Oh yeah, no, it's gotten ridiculous about how expensive it is. Speaking of which, let's jump into another subject. It's on the same thread as AI. Is this week, or in the last couple weeks, I should say, a tool popped up on the internet called Claudbot, which recently had to change its name because Anthropic sent them a cease and desist because it was too closely named to Claude, the AI. This is a tool that you can set up on any computer, and it works as a virtual assistant. And you can message it and tell it to do stuff, and it will figure it out. It's got almost unlimited memory. I've been playing around with it. It's a cool tool. I think it has a lot of areas where it needs to grow before it's actually useful for most people. But we're starting to see artificial general intelligence be rolled out to the populace.
Yeah, and in a more capable factor than it has been before. Like as one that you can set up and train to be one that you use yourself exclusively just for yourself. That's relatively new. Everything else has been like either through Meta or X or Chat GPT, and then you're still relying on their servers. So that's kind of a good way to free it, like to make it available to everybody. But then that also just makes it that much quicker to get it to the singularity.
Exactly. And I mean, it is a powerful tool. It got 90,000 stars on GitHub in the first like 3 weeks that it was released. It was crazily popular. It still is, I should say. I think there are some issues with it. Like I said, I personally had a hard time getting it to do what I needed it to do. So like, I just wanted it to come up with some content ideas and stuff, you know, and send them to me every morning via email. And it, so far it hasn't sent anything other than the few test times I was like, okay, send it to me now. It would send it. But then the next morning when it was supposed to send it, it didn't actually send. So I think the tool has some a ways to go, but this is definitely the beginning of artificial general intelligence and getting us comfortable with the concepts of it. And now you know why these companies like Amazon and Meta, Microsoft, all the big companies are spending so much money on data centers to build this stuff, because once they have the kinks worked out, it's like, stop and think of it this way. ChatGPT's only been out for just over 1,000 days.
Yeah.
You know, so what's going to happen in the next 1,000 days? And it shows no signs of slowing down. I think a lot of people thought, even experts in the field thought, that we would have hit our peak by now. And so far, I mean, every week it seems like there's something new coming out that just takes the technology and moves it massively ahead.
Yeah, well, we've been hearing about the AI bubble for the last year here, and it still hasn't popped yet. And it doesn't look like the inflation is going to be slowing down anytime soon on that bubble either.
I'm a bit in between on the bubble part of it. I think we are headed to an AI bubble popping probably this year, because we have companies like OpenAI who are dumping billions of dollars into data centers and research and model training and these things, but they're not making any money. So
Yeah,
at some
there's going to be a
point,
correction that'll come on all that spending.
exactly, it's very similar to what happened in 2000 with the .com bubble popping. Um, I
Then you'll be left with, instead of a whole bunch of small little companies worth a chunk of the larger amount, it'll go down to what it did at the end of the .com bubble there, where it was a handful of companies that controlled the vast majority of the infrastructure.
exactly, like for people that don't know, what happened in 2000 was it prior to 2000 is there was a big push to run fiber optic cable, and we ended up having a bunch of dead cable or dead fiber optic lines that weren't being utilized, and they were run all across the country. There was massive investments on infrastructure. It was going to be the new big thing. It was going to change the world. And then the bubble popped, and all these companies that had run all that fiber ran out of money and didn't have any sort of income base to actually bring money into their companies and make a profit. And then what it ended up happening after that is then we saw there. I think after the .com popped, it was Google, eBay. There was only a handful of companies, that Yahoo, that had survived, and that was because they had figured out some sort of monetization that made sense. But there was millions of companies that went under in that time. I mean, I know there was a guy I used to know years ago that had actually made a bunch of money doing porn sites,
Yeah.
and then invested it in a database company and had sold it just prior to the bubble popping, sold it for $10 million. Even he said, he's like, I don't know why they bought it for that. It was not worth that. It wasn't bringing in any money, blah, blah, blah. But these companies were all on such a big rush to get into this bubble that they spent all this money, they bought it, and he checked out because he was like, oh, I made my money back, so I'm getting out, and retired. And not long after that, the bubble popped and all these companies were left. It was a game of musical chairs, basically.
Yeah, well, you had guys that were making millions of dollars off of buying domain names and then selling them to companies. They go and buy company brand names as domain names on whatever domain they could think of. And then when the company went to go and register that domain and they couldn't, they had to buy it from these people. And some of them sold for millions of dollars.
Yeah, there was a lot of companies that got caught on that. I really wish I had been a little more forward thinking at that time, because I was registering domain names back then, but I didn't have any. I guess I'm just not snaky like that, so I didn't think to actually register at like a Coke.com or whatever some of these big companies ended up paying out for.
Yeah, I can't remember, but there was like one, I think Sears was one of them that got caught up in the domain name thing. They paid out the nose for it. It was some large retailer that had to pay out the nose to get their domain name as a .com.
Yeah, there was quite a few of them that got caught up in that. It wasn't good. It wasn't good. And I think, like I said, my guess as I see it now is that OpenAI will collapse. Somebody will walk in and buy up all their data centers. Maybe it will be Google or Microsoft or even XAI and Elon Musk.
I was gonna say it's most likely gonna be X and Grok that get OpenAI there.
Well, you see what, like, Grok has come a long way in just over a year. Like they started off, they were way behind the game, and now like their video system is phenomenally good.
Mm-hmm.
Phenomenally good. So, and cheap too.
But good.
Well, it's way cheaper than, okay, so for doing video, OpenAI, I think I want to say for an hour worth of video on OpenAI, it is, no, that can't be right. It's got to be less than that. Maybe it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes of video. Anyway, whatever the amount of video it is, OpenAI is about $40. Google's about $30. XAI is $4.20 for the same amount.
Ever since he did that Rogan thing, he's had a thing for the number 420, that man.
I think he was doing it long before he was ever on Rogan.
Well,
I think he's got a ketamine fetish too, but that's another thing.
he was in university in Canada for a year in the 90s. He was smoking weed.
Oh, 100%. We all were. Everybody was back then, especially in Canada. I mean, geez, everybody I went to college with, even the nerds were smoking weed back then. So,
well, it was funny because like when I first started smoking weed, it was like the cops, if you got caught with it, they'd be really harsh on you. And then just after I graduated in 95, it was like, oh, you got weed. The cops would take it. At least here in Saskatoon, they would take it from you, depending on how much it was. Like if it was like an ounce or less, they would just grab it, write you a ticket, tell you to show up at court, and then you'd get a fine.
yeah. I remember I got caught with a little bag in Alberta back in, I don't know, 97 or something. And I got a slap on the wrist. I had to go to court. They gave me a fine. It was a misdemeanor. Never had to get my fingerprints taken or anything. But had it been, even 10 years earlier, I would have actually, had a criminal record and all these things. So,
yeah, it's funny how like that, how in the 90s, that whole thing around that counterculture changed, especially here in Canada. It basically became de facto decriminalized overnight in the mid 90s.
I've always found the 90s were our generation's 60s, right? Like it was very counterculture. There was a lot of, everybody was into Nirvana and Pearl Jam and smoking weed, doing acid, that sort of thing. And then all of a sudden, we came into the like a new pop phase in the early 2000s. And I think we're kind of headed back towards that thing where, the 2030s are probably going to be very similar to the 60s and the 90s.
Yeah, with a smattering of similarities to the 1930s.
Yeah. Well, speaking
Not
of,
so much like politically, more culturally. Like there'll be people be a bit tighter with their money and stuff, because like I think we are going to be seeing like some kind of economic depression. Probably not as bad as Black Friday in 1929 there, September 29th, 1929. But it's still going to be like a major change for especially the people in Western nations. It's going to be a major economic change for them.
yeah, 100%. Like we seem to be headed that route.
The major sign for me was when under Trudeau's leadership, we went from having the best dollar that we have ever had in the history of Canada to going back to inflation rates that we had when we were kids in the 80s.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're seeing all Western nations kind of going through the same thing, and not to mention like our infrastructure is falling apart, our crime rates are exploding, our corruption is exploding, like everything is just
Well,
kind of going down the toilet. It goes back to what we were saying at the beginning of the show about China pulling so far ahead is that, yeah, maybe there is corruption. Well, there definitely is corruption in China, just like there is corruption in the Western countries. It's just, when the economy's doing well, nobody cares about corruption. It's only when it starts falling apart, people start to care.
Yeah. Oh, and that infrastructure stuff just brings to mind too. Like, we basically outsourced all the parts making for our infrastructure to overseas. Like, there's maybe 2 plants in all of North America that produces the transformers that we need to run the entire electric grid in North America.
Exactly. And actually, now that you say that, I think it's a good time to plug our sponsor for this week's episode is EMP Shield. They make a great device, plugs directly into your power panel, and you can get one for your car. Should there be an EMP explode over North America or massive solar flare, even a grid burnout, these devices are great. You can pick them up. Just go to empshield.com. And if you put in the code unexplained, you'll get 15% off. So that's just our quick sponsor plug. That's it for the show, though. No more.
Yeah, and that's like the sad thing. Even like Calgary, they're having a water shortage right now. It's been ongoing for a little over a year because the pipes that they need. Yeah, we make the pipes the size here in Canada, but the specialized coating that they need on the inside of the pipes for mainline water usage for people for drinking water are only made in Texas.
It seems to be like that for a lot of things these days, is that there's like 1 or 2 places that make it, and then all of a sudden something happens there and we're all left short. Where, back in my parents' age, everything was made everywhere. So there was never any real major shortages of things, not that I know of anyway.
Yeah, same here. And if it was a shortage, it was usually on stuff like fruits or vegetables that were grown in specific regions that we didn't have the technology to produce year round like we do now.
Exactly. So, let's change subjects here before we get too far off the beaten path. Excuse me. So did you hear the rumor that Trump's going to announce disclosure on July 8th?
Yeah, I keep seeing stuff about that all over the internet lately. Like, it's in my Facebook feed, which is weird because that's usually just friends and family, but somehow disclosure ended up getting into my Facebook feed. It's all over my X feed. Between disclosure and making Canadians angry posts.
Mm-hmm.
That's like pretty much all my X feed is.
Right.
And then YouTube too. YouTube's been really pushing that Trump's going to be announcing something come July 8th. I kind of like the date that they chose for that announcement as well.
Why is that?
Isn't that around the time that Roswell happened in 1948 or 47?
It could very well be, I mean, I'm not going to discount it totally. I could see Trump doing it, but I tend to think that if we're going to see stuff like that, there's going to be more of a lead up to it. I know that Spielberg has that big film coming out I think it's called Disclosure, isn't it? The one coming out this summer. Like, so maybe that's just another viral marketing plug for it. But I also find it interesting that this stuff keeps popping up as soon as like the Epstein files get released and everybody needs to stay distracted.
Yeah, well, and then the rumors of that Russian ship captain getting arrested in Scotland there. Well, not in Scotland itself, in Scottish waters.
So I looked into that just before showtime. So for people that are unaware, the United States has decided to go in and arrest 2 captains that were on, or the captain and his co-pilot or whatever. His first mate, that's what it is. They were one of the Venezuelan oil tankers that had been flying under a Russian flag and had headed back and were captured in between Iceland and Scotland. And the Scottish courts ruled that they needed to stay in Scotland to face their trials. And the U.S. just decided to go in and grab them in the middle of the night and send a nice email to the Scottish Parliament and say, hey, by the way, we did this last night.
Yeah. At least he informed them.
Right. So it seems like the world order is falling apart quite quickly. I mean, that's seems to be the thread of this entire show is that you can't have you need to have those understandings with your partner countries that you won't do those things, that you'll respect their laws. And once that stuff starts falling apart, we get into really shaky waters.
Yeah, and being a member of the UK, Scotland is one of the closest allied nations to the United States.
Yeah, I found it really strange that they would even do that. Like usually Western nations, like if they had said, gone to Scotland and been like, hey, we want those guys to face trial in the US, the Scottish would be like, okay, to come and take them.
Yeah.
But,
Or at least set up extradition proceedings to do it legally within the Scottish laws.
exactly. And now, you just go in the middle of the night and take them. That's kind of a big red flag for NATO, right? Like we're not nearly as strong of an alliance as what we thought we were.
Well, and if you look at the articles of treaty for NATO, that basically breaks Article 1. That was a use of force on an allied nation's territory. Whereas when it comes to those kinds of things, you're supposed to use non-violent means.
Interesting. Yeah, I did not know that.
Yeah, they sent in the Coast Guard into sovereign waters. The U.S. Coast Guard went into sovereign waters and arrested somebody in those sovereign waters. That could be seen as an act of aggression according to Article 1.
It goes back to what we were talking about last week about how this kind of really mirrors what was going on during World War One, right? Like these breakdown of the world order.
Well, and that's the thing with World War One too. The reason why it spiraled so quickly is all the little treaties and stuff that each independent nation in Europe had signed amongst each other. Part of the reason why the Russians sided with us instead of the Germans in World War One was because they had a pact of aggression that if something was to happen to Serbia, I believe it was, that both the UK and Russia would stand up for the Serbian defense and defend the Serbians.
Well, it was interesting too. I had seen, and I didn't get a chance to confirm it before showtime, but apparently the Five Eyes have stopped sharing intelligence information out of the Caribbean with the Americans after what happened in Venezuela, which is another fracture that just is a bad sign.
Well, and that goes with a bunch of other rumors too, the leading up until that point, that the Five Eyes had basically really stopped sharing anything relevant with the U.S. and were just giving them basically diplomatic communications saying, yeah, this is what we found kind of thing, but nothing of substance since Trump took office in 2025.
Well, and didn't they stop, or I shouldn't say the Five Eyes as much as the Americans have stopped sharing information with Canada because of our relations to apparent ties to the cartels.
Yeah. And they were trying actually to push Canada out of the Five Eyes, and the rest of the Five Eyes said, no, I don't think so.
Crazy days that we're living in, man. Crazy days.
Yeah. And that's one of the most secure, up until 2025, it was one of the most secure spying alliances on the planet there, because the five nations involved, the five main nations, Canada, the US, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand, they all basically stem from the same root empire, which is the Great British Empire.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. There's another, man, I keep bringing up TikTok this week. There's I must be spending way too much time on it. There's a YouTube influencer runs some sort of intelligence corporation type thing, and she was saying that basically what's going on in the U.S. with Trump, it has to do with the fact that the British Empire's been the one manipulating everything in the background for years, which I guess in ways, a lot of ways, does line up as far as like the drug trafficking. You know, they've been involved in that since the Opium Wars type thing.
Yeah.
And it kind of does hold some credence that, maybe Trump is trying to dismantle the strength of the United Kingdom by some of his moves. Now, do I think that's true? I don't know. I really don't. I personally think that, like, I feel like Trump's going nuts. Like, I don't think he's making very logical choices, because there's way better ways if he wants to do what he's doing, there's way better ways to go about it. There's much more, I don't want to say diplomatic as much as like covert, intelligent ways to go about trying to dismantle these things than the way he's doing it, where he goes on X at 3:00 in the morning and posts some big long rant about whatever it is of the day.
I think he's Reagan 2.0. His second term. Did Reagan run his second term? No, it was other people, because he was Joe Biden by the time he was in his second term. And I think he's the modern Ronald Reagan, the follow-up to Joe Biden's Alzheimer's presidency.
It could very well be. It could very well be. I mean, after he got shot, he's never been quite the same. I mean, like, honestly, in his first term, I didn't mind Trump.
No,
I thought he brought up a lot of good ideas, and yeah, he was playing for the Americans, and they have
but at the same time, he was also playing for North America, because when he signed the original CUSMA deal there, it benefited all three nations involved in that deal. It benefited Canada, it benefited the United States, and it benefited Mexico.
Yeah, that's right. So, but his second term, I mean, like, almost immediately, as soon as he was sworn in, it became, Canada, Greenland, Venezuela, like all these things, and
my political enemies in my home country.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you think the U.S. is headed to civil war? What's your thoughts on that?
Personally, there's a lot of signs pointing to it, but hopefully cooler heads will prevail, and they'll realize, like, hey, maybe if we slow down a bit, take a look at what's actually happening in our country, tighten up our borders a little bit, get this immigration stuff under control, find out who's legitimately a refugee and who was somebody who was a criminal of opportunity released by the governments from these countries that these people came from, and then deal with people on a case-by-case basis that way. If they keep doing what's going on, like, say, what's happening in Minnesota, I have a feeling that we may see Civil War 2.0 in the United States.
Well, I did just see that they have arrested Don Lemon, the CNN commentator. I don't like using the term reporter, because I don't think he was really much of a reporter, as much as he was just commenting on the situations, the talking head. But he was arrested in Minnesota just a couple days ago. So I wish cooler heads would prevail, but I'm starting to become very nervous as to what is going to happen there, because it seems like you can't get everybody on the same page. And, like, if not, when 9/11 happened, we saw everybody come together. Like, there have been some fractures between the United States and other countries, and everybody just kind of got on board. And now,
one of the smallest cities in Canada opened themselves up and accepted pretty much every plane that was coming in from Europe and Africa headed for the United States that day, and welcomed them with open arms, because the US was canceling all flights. And then Canada was like the first nation to go, hey, we're there with you if you need any help, buddy. Like, you want to go kick some ass? We're there for you.
Exactly. Like, how many people, or how many different countries went to Afghanistan, right? Like, they were all like, it was an Article 5 situation. It was
the only time Article 5 has ever been invoked by a NATO member.
Mm-hmm. And they all went. That, I think that was kind of the thing that pisses me off with Trump, is his talk about how we didn't help.
Mm-hmm.
You tell that to the 148 families that lost a child because our soldiers went over there and helped. Like, that's kind of fucked up.
Yeah. Well, look at how he's treated his own Gold Star member families.
Exactly. I'm not a big fan.
And Gold Star members, man, those are people who basically, to get a Gold Star, you have to die.
Yeah.
It's pretty much like the Medal of Honor. You have to be willing to risk your life for it. And chances are that, yeah, you may have saved a bunch of people, but in doing so, you laid your life down in those actions.
Interesting. Yeah. I don't know. It's a strange world that we're going through right now. Like everything's just so chaotic, and it's hard to keep track of where everything's going.
Well, and the thing is with the Don Lemon arrest, the state judges in Minnesota refused to press charges. So basically, that Don Lemon arrest, you could equate it to a political arrest because the U.S. Justice Department and the U.S. Attorney's Office put charges on him for violating the First Amendment of that church.
MAGA, it's okay when we do it.
Yep.
But that was my...
It's a backbone and starts fighting back, it's wrong. At least according to most of the American questions I see on Quora.
Exactly. Well, and that's something that I think I was kind of clear back, 10 years ago when the left wing was doing similar things. I said, like this tit for tat, it's going to be, it's bad enough when the left does it, but when the right starts to do it, then we're in a lot of trouble. And here we are, where the right is starting to do the same things that the left did. Like the big influencers online that were so anti-Biden and everything that he was doing seemed to be just going along with everything Trump's doing and calling it some sort of, like grand plan that, this is how we get our country back, et cetera, et cetera.
It reminds me a lot of what happened in France after the revolution during the times of terror. Because basically in France during the times of terror, which was just after the French Revolution, where they took out the royal family in France there, you basically had a bunch of political factions break apart. You had the Jacobins led by Robespierre. You had a bunch of other factions, and under Robespierre, he was starting to round up all of his all political dissidents. Anybody who didn't believe in what he was saying is the truth, or believed in how he was running things was the way things should be run, were basically put to the guillotine. And what ended up happening is he himself ended up being deposed and put to the guillotine.
Yeah. We could very well see a similar situation happen in the next, couple of years.
Yeah, like we're either going to have what happened during the times of terror, or we're going to have the Nazification of the Western world. And either outcome doesn't look very good.
No. And honestly, like I still think that at some point China and Russia are going to be forced into trying to perform a decapitation strike on the United States, just because they can't allow. Okay, so I don't think it's going to be Trump. I think Trump, he plays his part. He's as bad as he can be in some scenarios. I don't think
he's the usher for 2030.
Yeah, very much so. But I think whoever comes after Trump is going to be our big problem.
Yeah. It's either going to be a hardcore communist shift. Because if you look at like some of the larger cities in the States, especially New York, they just had a major communist voted in as mayor there. And he's already trying to make major sweeping changes. One of his policies is to tax based on class.
Yeah, I seen that. And I seen he also wants to socialize the grocery stores.
Yeah. Well, if they paid attention to what was happening at the end of communism in Russia and looked at the grocery stores there, they probably don't want socialized grocery stores.
Well, hey, look what's goes on in the north of Canada. I mean, more or less we have socialized grocery stores because everything has to be subsidized for the cost of shipping it here. Mm-hmm. And, like there's places up north that are paying, $28 for a gallon of orange juice. Oh. Right? Like,
sucks too, because they just discontinued all frozen concentrate orange juice mixes.
I seen that. I thought that was a really strange thing to do. And they were like, oh, it's because nobody's buying it anymore. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I seem to know a lot of people that buy that stuff, but maybe that's because at my location, people still do that.
Well, it's the cheaper alternative to paying $28 for a gallon of juice.
Well, yeah, it's way easier to ship, way easier to store. You can throw it in your freezer and just pull it out. But yeah, I don't know, man. Like, we're headed into some bad areas.
Yeah, well, and everything's going to a subscription-based service. My uncle's a mechanic. He pays $3,600 a month to access the different manufacturers' codes for their cars, so that he can like do diagnostics on vehicles and stuff. He pays $3,600 a month. If it wasn't subsidized through his job, he wouldn't be able to get all the subscriptions he needs to do his job correctly. And then on top of that, he has tools that cost thousands of dollars because they're specialized tools that companies have made that unless you're certified through the company, you can't purchase. So you have to pay for the certification course. And then on top of that, you have to pay the $1,000 for the tool because it's a proprietary tool that works for the proprietary part that has the proprietary fastener.
Well, it's like my truck, right? Like I bought a 2000 and was it 20? Yeah, it's a 2024 F-150. It's like there's no way I can work on it myself. Everything is so integrated, and like I have to take it into the shop to get it worked on.
Even just for a simple oil change, you need to do stuff with the computer to access some of the newer vehicles. You can get the wrench and stuff on the oil filter, but it won't release unless you put the little fob onto the computer there, put a special code in that says to release the oil filter. Then it'll allow you to unwrench the filter.
You imagine, like it just nickel and diamond people to death. And then we wonder why the Western world's fallen apart.
Yeah. And you also want to know why the cost of your mechanic went up from $50 an hour to $150 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Because every mechanic has to pay that $3,600 a month if they want to keep access to the database.
That's crazy.
And that's monthly. That's not yearly. That's monthly.
Everybody's got to make profit, right? Like, and this is where I can kind of understand the communist viewpoint of where capitalism fails, because what we've got ourselves into is a situation where every year these public companies have to make more and more profit, or else their shareholders aren't happy. But at the same time, you're basically causing the corruption of your society while doing it. And like, I'm a big capitalist. Like, I think it's great that people can open, people should be opening their own businesses. People should be working for themselves. Like the more small business we have, the better. I'm not a big fan of these big public corporations because of how it ends up. I mean, it's like I'm not a big fan of unions because what's happened, like look at the auto manufacturers. You have somebody that's sweeping floors that's making, $40, $50 an hour, which, hey, look, I'm not hating on them. You got to make a living. But at some point, those costs have to be paid somewhere. So that's why, we have to pay $150 an hour for our mechanics.
Yeah. Oh, and then you got like most of the automotive industry is automated. So the guys on the actual production line are nothing more than a button pusher. They stand there and push a button for 12 hours a day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Like,
and those guys are getting paid $60 to $150 an hour to do that.
Well, look at what's going on with Canada Post.
Oh my goodness.
For, people outside of Canada, we have a crown corporation, they call it, that is subsidized by the government to provide mail across the country. And at one time, it was a necessity to get mail from one end of the country to the other. However, what happens now is we have letter carriers that are making, like I said, $40, $50 an hour, when most kids coming out of school are only making $15 an hour.
They have ads for part-time letter carriers that I've seen in the last year here, where the starting wage for the carrier is $28.95 an hour.
Jesus Christ.
But you're only guaranteed 20 hours a week.
But it's a unionized job that you can't get fired from.
Bingo. For $28.95 an hour to walk outside for 4 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. And see that there's the problem is that you can't, in a free market, you can't do that sort of thing. I know like Canada Post took $1.8 billion loss last year.
Yeah.
I mean, their CEOs are still getting their bonuses. You know, they're
Yeah.
still making big bucks every year to run the corporation.
Everyone from middle to upper management's all getting their bonuses.
Exactly. Like that's why I'm not a big fan of public corporations. I think I love small business. I love the concept of capitalist society run on small business like it used to be, where if you wanted to become a mechanic, you could go out and start a mechanic shop.
Yeah.
If you wanted to, well, nowadays like software development, I'm a software developer. I own my own company, and I think that's a great thing. But
Yeah.
what I see happening is that these big public corporations are, like they're constantly trying to screw over the worker to maintain their profits. They're screwing over the consumer. They're raising the prices constantly. And it's just becoming a vicious cycle where at some point the music's going to stop and we're going to be, not left with enough chairs to sit on.
Yeah. And everything will be owned by major monopolies.
Exactly.
And it's already starting to go that way. Like when you actually look at who owns all the big separate companies, it boils down to just a handful of major conglomerates that actually own everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like you look at the family tree of like the big military industrial complex companies like Boeing or General Electric, and you see all the companies that are under their umbrella. It's like, well, there's 4 big companies that control all 55,000 smaller to mid-sized companies.
Right. Yeah. And
then you got guys like BlackRock that own them all.
yeah, exactly. Like the free market doesn't really exist as nearly what it used to be. Like I know I read a stat, was it last year, that like I can't remember how many small businesses it started and how low it was compared to previous years. And
Yeah,
we're
it's like
just,
one of the lowest years ever for startups. Like
yeah.
small business startups.
And that's what drove our society, was the fact that these small businesses would come up, and yes, some of them would grow, some of them would fail, but it was an equal playing field. And now with, like you said, subscriptions for things and in ways they nickel and dime these people, it's like guys that buy franchises.
Yeah.
Like if you buy a McDonald's franchise, like you're not making that great of money. Your outfit, like the restaurant itself, might make it quite a bit, but a lot of that gets paid back to McDonald's, and they come in every year and tell you got to spend $2 million on this new equipment that you're going to take a loan from them and then
And you
pay
have
it off.
target profits you have to hit. If you fail to meet those target profits, you lose your license for that franchise.
Exactly.
I watched it happen with the Tim Hortons franchise. I worked for the franchisee. I don't know how they weren't able to make the money in 18 months. Like, because you're given, like with Tim Hortons, when I was working for them, franchisees were given a year to make $1 million profit.
Jesus.
If you couldn't make that $1 million profit in that year, or no, not a profit, gross. If you couldn't make that gross
sense.
first in that first year, you were given an additional 6 months. So you got 18 months in total to make your $1 million gross. If you're not able to do that, they strip your license.
Wow. Yeah,
you don't get the fee back either.
No, I don't imagine. It's like everything else that way. I don't know, man. Yeah. We're coming up on just about an hour now. We got one more subject to talk about before we end it, but you sent this to me earlier that there's a possible coup attempt going on in China.
Yeah, that's like I'm not sure how true it is, because like a lot of the sources I've come across were basically just AI news sources from like citing other sources like the Times of India, and we all know how reliable the Times of India can be.
Right.
And and the only solid source I could find is China Uncensored, and he's still very, like, he skews very pro-West and very anti-China. So anything like related to Xi is saying that, yeah, maybe not true. But then I did stumble across a video just before we started recording this afternoon by Philip DeFranco actually talking about it. And so if somebody like Philip DeFranco, who's pretty much mainstream talking head for YouTube, is talking about it, there might be some substance to it. And the general who was arrested actually has been arrested. I was able to verify that source through the CTV, that the one general that was supposedly arrested by Xi, who was in charge of this coup, has been arrested.
I did see that. I think that was last week when I seen it, that they had purged 2 or 3 generals that were kind of all involved in something, but at the time nobody had any real information about what it was.
Well, here's the scary thing about the one general, especially for China, if they're thinking of going to war anytime soon. He was the last Chinese general who had any actual combat experience.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And that's, it's hard. China tends to suppress coup attempts quite severely. So to get really good, solid information out of the country is almost impossible. So you never really know. But when you do see them clean house and start arresting these people, you got to wonder. I mean, it really reminds me of Jack Ma from Alibaba. Was it Alibaba that he ran?
Yeah, I believe he owned Alibaba.
Yeah, and then he suddenly disappears and nobody hears from him, and then the next thing you know, he's just kind of hanging out and traveling, and he doesn't have any control of Alibaba again. So,
yeah, 5 years later, he resurfaced all of a sudden in Macau betting. That's where the first found him, was in Macau.
Interesting. Yeah. So I don't know.
And if you're not sure what Macau is basically China's version of Las Vegas. It's a semi-autonomous state that's controlled by China, where they allow legalized gambling.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. I wonder what actually happened with him, because you never did hear anything more about it. He disappeared and he was suddenly removed as head of Alibaba. And, he was really starting to become the Steve Jobs of China at the time. So,
well, and the crazy thing is he was also considered Canada's richest man because he had dual citizenship between Canada and China.
Oh, interesting.
In fact, the first shipping ports that he used to bring his Alibaba stuff over from China was the Vancouver ports.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah, he's got huge ties to Vancouver and in the city of Vancouver. Basically, his whole family immigrated from China over to Canada.
Well, that's one thing we do know about Vancouver is the amount of CCP officers that live there.
Well, here's a crazy fact. I dated one of his nieces. I didn't know she was one of his nieces until just before we broke up. She bought a house cash in Vancouver. So she moved from Saskatoon to Vancouver. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I was like, what? You're related to the Moz? Yeah. She told me her parents had 2 children. Her dad was some high-ranking official in the CCP because he's a doctor of a nuclear physicist, a doctor of nuclear physics. And her mom was some kind of high-ranking education minister, not minister, but education professional in China.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, dude,
yeah. So
you
she
really
has an older sister. Yeah, she had an older sister. And because the one-child policy, if you were a high-ranking enough member of the party, you could apply to have a second child if your first child was a woman.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so I got to learn quite a bit about that situation. And yeah, he kind of just disappeared for a little bit there, and then most likely paid a bunch of money and got released.
Well, gangsters, man. Just gangsters. But like we said at the beginning of the show, corruption is a universal thing. It's not just limited to one country or the other. I think we're all ruled by corrupt leaders. It's all just one big gangster outfit.
Well, it reminds me a lot of professional wrestling. You see the heels and the baby faces every week on TV, bad mouthing each other, beating the crap out of each other. But at the end of the day, they all go sit in the same bar and write the script for the next episode.
Exactly. Well, Mike, I think we're up on our record time for this week. So thanks for coming along. And
It's always fun going down these rabbit holes.
right. Hopefully we didn't jump around as much as we did on the last show, but we probably did.
Yeah, but I think most of the stuff that we talked about today was still within the topics that we were initially discussing.
I hope so. I mean, we're going to get better at this. It's been a while, so I think we're still a little rusty on doing a show, but hopefully coming up, we're going to have some interviews. We're going to, do some special shows on special subjects as things happen. For the next few shows, I think we'll just keep up with the news and see what happens. But
yeah, maybe do some deep dives into some really interesting things like the Tartaria and the mud flood stuff there. That's a bit of history that I don't really believe a bunch of, but it's a really interesting rabbit hole to go down because they do have some very interesting evidence that they do present that could be taken either way, which is kind of fun.
I'm not a big believer in flat Earth, but I love talking to flat earthers. Like I really enjoy the conversations regardless of my disagreements on how things actually work in the solar system.
But hey, what do we know? It could just be one giant hologram for all we know. And in fact, if you go with the holographic universe theory, basically everything is just a hologram. And we're experiencing reality through the perception of ourself, which is kind of weird.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because on Saturday on our TikTok channel. So if you're not, if you have TikTok, I know there's a lot of people that don't like it, but if you do have TikTok, we've set up a really cool TikTok channel. Just search for The Unexplained Company. And tomorrow I'm releasing a video on the top 10 or top 5 ways the world will end. And number 1, just spoiler, is that it's everything is a simulation, and maybe the aliens will just unplug us because they need more RAM.
Yeah, I actually just came across that theory myself like a week ago.
Well, with the cost of RAM going up, I guess it's probably a possibility. So who knows? But like I said, check it out. And if anybody wants to check out the other podcast we do, it's Unexplained History. It's been exploding in popularity in the last couple weeks, especially. This week we talked about the Perry Reese map of Antarctica. And then on Thursday it was MK Ultra, which is on screen right now if you're watching on YouTube. The CIA's secret mind control experiments.
Speaking of MK Ultra, I have to make a correction from last week because I gave out some bad information on MK Ultra.
Okay.
The Canadian doctor involved in MK Ultra was not Cameron McEwen. It was Dr. Donald Ewan Cameron, and he was the head of the Allen Memorial Institute at McGill University and the inventor of psychic driving.
There we go. Okay. So this week on Unexplained History on, I can't remember what Tuesday's show is off the top of my head. I should have wrote a note. But on Thursday, we're talking about the secret of Fatima. The week after that, it's the Karnak stones of France and deep underground military bases on Thursday. So check it out. Just search Unexplained History Podcast. Really popular on Spotify. That seems to be where like 60% of people are listening from. So check it out there if you have Spotify. But we're available on all major podcast platforms. So
awesome.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks, Mike. And everybody check it out. And we'll see you guys again next Friday for another show.